They predicted the storm would destroy everything. Every weather report, blaring from the old radio in the kitchen, every anxious whisper from the townspeople who called, urging me to leave. Every creak of the old farmhouse seemed to scream the same dire warning. "Evacuate," they said, their voices laced with a fear that was almost contagious. "Leave it all behind. There's nothing you can do. It's just a farm, Clara. You can rebuild." But they didn't understand. They didn't understand what everything meant to me. It wasn't just the house, the 20 acres of fields stretching out to the creek, the few animals we had left, Bessie and Daisy, our 2 milk cows, and a dozen stubborn chickens. It was the legacy of 3 generations, the sweat and tears etched into every weathered fence post, every rough-hewn beam in the barn, every ancient stone in the foundation of our home. It was the promise I'd made to my late husband Daniel, whispered over his grave beneath the old oak by the creek, that I would never let this land go, not ever. And so, as the sky turned a bruised, ominous purple, a color that spoke of impending violence, and the wind began its mournful rising howl, a sound that chilled me to the bone, I made a choice that felt both foolish and inevitable, born of a stubborn love for this place. I stayed in the barn, our oldest, most resilient structure, not just to weather the tempest, but to save our future, to save the very essence of who we were and who we still could be. The decision hung heavy in the air, a silent defiance against the overwhelming power gathering on the horizon, a challenge to the very forces of nature. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of raw fear, and an even stronger, more insistent pulse of stubborn hope. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving them all wrong, about proving to myself that some things, some futures, were worth fighting for, even against the wrath of nature itself, even when all logic screamed for retreat. The wind began as a low moan, a distant, unsettling hum that vibrated through the very ground beneath my feet, a prelude to the symphony of destruction. It was the kind of sound that made the hairs on your arms stand on end, a primal warning that something ancient and terrible was stirring, something beyond human control. I walked through the house one last time, my hand trailing over the worn wooden banister, smooth and cool beneath my fingertips, 1,000 memories embedded in its grain. The faded floral wallpaper, peeling slightly at the edges, whispered stories of countless dinners, laughter, and quiet evenings. I paused at the mantelpiece, my gaze lingering on the photographs. Daniel younger, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled, his strong arm around me, our faces close. Our daughter Lily, a gap-toothed grin missing 2 front teeth, her bright eyes full of mischief. Each touch was a silent farewell, a desperate attempt to imprint these precious memories onto my skin, to carry them with me into the unknown, to keep them safe from the coming oblivion. The air grew thick, charged with an electricity that pricked my skin, making my nerves hum. Outside, the trees thrashed like desperate dancers caught in a feverish trance, their branches clawing at the angry, darkening sky. Rain began to fall, not gently, but in fat, heavy drops that splattered against the window panes like flung pebbles. I could feel the house trembling, a fragile shell against the gathering fury, its old bones groaning in protest. A knot tightened in my stomach, a cold dread that threatened to paralyze me, to root me to the spot. But I pushed it down, deep inside, where it couldn't reach my resolve, where it couldn't touch the stubborn core of my being. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. Lily was safe, miles away with her aunt in the next county, a small, precious comfort in the face of the impending chaos. My husband, Daniel, would have wanted me to fight for this place, to protect what we had built together, brick by brick, dream by dream, with calloused hands and unwavering hearts. His memory was a shield, a silent promise that fueled my courage, a whisper in my ear that I was not alone. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours, a battle fought for the ghosts of the past and the hopes of the future. The barn, built by Daniel's grandfather over 80 years ago, was a fortress of weathered oak and stone, its massive timbers groaning under the strain of countless seasons, each creak a testament to its enduring strength. It smelled of hay, sweet and dry, old wood, rich and earthy, and the faint, sweet scent of dried herbs I'd hung from the rafters, a comforting aroma that spoke of home and hearth. I'd spent the last 2 days reinforcing it, nailing planks across the windows, boarding up every vulnerable opening, securing the huge double doors with heavy chains and thick padlocks. Inside, it was a sanctuary, albeit a temporary and precarious one. Our 2 milk cows, Bessie and Daisy, lowed softly in their stalls, their large, placid eyes reflecting the dim, dancing light from my lantern, their breath warm and comforting in the chill air. A dozen chickens clucked nervously in their coop, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, their usual squabbling replaced by an uneasy silence. I had brought in extra feed, enough for several days, water in heavy buckets, and a small, worn cot for myself, along with a few precious belongings. A worn photo album, its pages soft from countless touches, Daniel's old harmonica, a smooth, cool weight in my hand, and a tattered copy of Lily's favorite storybook, its corners dog-eared from repeated readings. The wind outside was now a deafening roar, a monstrous beast tearing at the walls, rattling the very foundations of the barn. Debris began to pelt the roof, sounding like 1,000 angry fists, a relentless assault. The barn shuddered, groaning like a wounded animal, its ancient timbers protesting, but it held, for now. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, desperate to escape. I pulled my thick wool shawl tighter around me, trying to ward off the chill that had nothing to do with the temperature, a cold dread that seeped into my bones. This was it. The storm was here, a force of nature unleashed, and we were at its mercy. The first true impact was a sickening thud, a sound that vibrated through the very ground and up into my teeth, rattling my bones. The barn groaned, a deep, resonant sound of ancient wood protesting, a living thing fighting for its life. Dust motes danced wildly in the lantern light, tiny particles caught in the maelstrom, swirling like miniature galaxies. Bessie let out a frightened bellow, pulling at her tether, her eyes wide with terror. I rushed to her, stroking her broad, warm flank, whispering reassurances I barely believed myself. "It's all right, girl. We're safe. We're safe." The words felt hollow, swallowed by the relentless shriek of the wind, which seemed to mock my fragile hope. Through a tiny crack in the reinforced door, a sliver of the outside world, I glimpsed a terrifying tableau. Trees bent at impossible angles, their branches a blur against the bruised sky, their leaves ripped away. Rain lashed down in horizontal sheets, blurring the world into a chaotic watercolor of gray and black. A sharp crack, like a rifle shot, echoed above the storm's roar, closer this time, chillingly close. I flinched, my breath catching in my throat, my mind racing. Was it the old oak by the creek, the one Daniel and I had carved our initials into? Or something closer, something that threatened the very structure of the barn? The thought of the farmhouse, standing alone and vulnerable, sent a fresh wave of panic through me, a cold knot of dread. But I couldn't go to it. I couldn't abandon the animals, couldn't abandon the barn. This was my post. This was my stand. My hands, calloused from years of farm work, from pulling weeds and lifting hay bales, clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms, the pain a welcome distraction from the fear. I could taste the metallic tang of fear, sharp and acrid, but beneath it, a stubborn resolve began to harden, a core of steel that refused to yield. Hours blurred into an eternity of noise and terror. The barn was a drum, beaten relentlessly by the wind and rain, each gust a hammer blow. Every creak, every groan, every shudder sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, keeping me on edge. I moved between the animals, a silent guardian, checking their tethers, murmuring comforting words, my presence a small, fragile anchor in the chaos. The chickens huddled together, silent and still, their tiny eyes wide with fear, their usual squawking replaced by an eerie quiet. Daisy, usually so calm and imperturbable, was trembling violently, her head pressed against the rough wooden slats of her stall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I sat beside her, leaning my back against the rough wood, trying to match my breathing to her frantic gasps, to share my calm with her. The lantern, my only source of light, flickered precariously, its flame dancing wildly, casting dancing shadows that made the familiar interior seem alien and menacing, a distorted nightmare. A sudden, violent gust ripped at the roof, and I heard the sickening tear of wood, a sound that pierced through the din of the storm. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird trying to escape. A small section of the roof, near the back, had given way, leaving a gaping hole. Rain, cold and relentless, began to stream in, forming a dark, rapidly spreading patch on the hay-strewn floor. Panic, sharp and icy, threatened to overwhelm me, to send me spiraling into despair. This was it. The barn was failing. Everything was failing. But then Daniel's face flashed in my mind, his steady gaze, his quiet strength, his unwavering belief in me. "Never give up, Clara," he'd always said, his voice a gentle reminder. Not on this land. Not on us. His voice, a phantom whisper, cut through the storm, a lifeline in the raging tempest. The hole in the roof was small, but it was a breach, a weakness that the storm would exploit with merciless efficiency. I knew I had to act, and quickly, before the damage became irreparable. My mind, usually so clear and decisive, felt sluggish, dulled by fear and exhaustion. But Daniel's words, his steadfast spirit, resonated within me, a beacon in the darkness. Never give up. I scanned the barn, my eyes darting from one object to another, searching for anything that could help, anything that could buy us more time. My gaze landed on an old, heavy tarpaulin, folded neatly in a corner, left there from last season's repairs, forgotten until now. It was cumbersome, stiff with dust and cobwebs, but it was strong, made of thick, resilient canvas, and it was my only chance. With a surge of adrenaline, a desperate burst of energy, I dragged it across the floor, the rough canvas scraping against the wood, a harsh, grating sound. It was heavier than it looked, soaked with years of grime, and my muscles screamed in protest, but I pushed through the pain, fueled by a primal need to survive. The wind howled through the new opening, a mocking laugh, threatening to rip the tarp from my grasp, to send it flying into the night. I wrestled with it, cursing under my breath, my fingers fumbling with the ropes, stiff and cold. The rain lashed down, soaking my clothes, chilling me to the bone, but I barely noticed. Every movement was a struggle against the invisible force trying to tear everything apart. I climbed onto a stack of hay bales, reaching for the rafters, my body aching, my breath ragged, each gasp a desperate plea. This was more than just patching a roof. It was a desperate act of defiance, a silent prayer against the overwhelming power of the storm, a declaration that we would not yield. Securing the tarp was a brutal dance with the elements, a desperate struggle against an unseen enemy. The wind fought me, a malevolent entity, trying to snatch the canvas away, to throw me from my precarious perch on the hay bales. Rain stung my eyes, blurring my vision, making the ropes slick and hard to tie, each knot a challenge. My fingers, numb with cold and exertion, fumbled with the knots, each one a testament to my desperate will, my stubborn refusal to give up. I could feel the barn shuddering around me, the timbers groaning, the very air vibrating with the storm's fury, a symphony of destruction. Bessie and Daisy, sensing my struggle, shifted nervously in their stalls, their low moans a mournful counterpoint to the wind's shriek, their fear mirroring my own. I gritted my teeth, pulling harder, my muscles screaming in protest. A sharp pain shot through my shoulder, a familiar ache from an old injury, a reminder of past battles, but I ignored it. There was no time for pain, no time for weakness, only the urgent need to secure our shelter. This was about survival. This was about the future. Finally, with a last desperate tug, the tarp was secured, flapping wildly but holding, a temporary shield against the relentless assault. I collapsed onto the hay, my body trembling, my lungs burning, each breath a painful gasp. The small victory was exhilarating, a fleeting moment of triumph in the heart of the storm, a brief respite. But I knew it was just a reprieve. The storm was far from over, and the house, my home, still stood alone, vulnerable, against the full force of nature's wrath, its fate unknown. What was happening out there? The unknown gnawed at me, a cold, persistent fear, a question that echoed in the roaring wind. As the storm raged, a new sound began to penetrate the deafening roar, a rhythmic, insistent thudding, coming from the far end of the barn near the main doors. My heart leaped into my throat, a sudden sharp pang of alarm. The reinforced door. It was holding, but something was hitting it, something heavy and relentless, a persistent assault. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my exhaustion, cutting through the dull ache in my muscles. Was it a fallen tree, its branches flailing in the wind? Or something else, something more sinister? I grabbed my lantern, its flickering light casting monstrous, dancing shadows that distorted the familiar shapes of the barn as I crept towards the sound. Each step was a deliberate act of courage, my breath catching in my chest, my senses on high alert. The thudding grew louder, more urgent, punctuated by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood, a terrifying symphony of destruction. The chains were straining, groaning under the immense pressure, threatening to snap. I reached the door, pressing my ear against the cold, rough wood, trying to discern the nature of the assault. The thudding was irregular, violent. It sounded like something alive, something desperate, something trapped. My mind raced, conjuring images of wild animals, of rogue debris, of the unimaginable horrors the storm could unleash. But then, a faint whimper, a sound so small and fragile, so utterly human, cut through the din. It wasn't debris. It wasn't an animal. It was a child, trapped outside, caught in the heart of the storm, desperately trying to find shelter, desperately clinging to life. My blood ran cold, a sudden icy realization. How could a child be out here? Why were they alone in this raging tempest? The questions swirled in my mind, a frantic, desperate dance. But one thing was clear. I had to help. I had to open the door, no matter the risk. Opening the door was an act of sheer will against the storm's fury, a battle against the very elements. The chains, already strained to their breaking point, fought against my trembling fingers, stiff with cold and exertion. The wind shrieked, a banshee's wail, trying to tear the door from its hinges, to rip it from my grasp and cast it into the abyss. I gritted my teeth, pulling with all my strength, my muscles screaming in protest, each fiber burning. The splintering wood groaned, threatening to give way, to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Finally, with a desperate heave, a surge of adrenaline, I managed to unlatch one side, creating a narrow gap, a sliver of hope. The wind immediately tore at it, a hungry beast trying to wrench it open, but I held firm, bracing my body against the heavy wood, my feet digging into the hay-strewn floor. Through the gap, I saw them. Not one child, but two small figures, huddled together, soaked to the bone, their clothes plastered to their tiny bodies, their faces pale with terror, streaked with dirt and tears. A boy, no older than 8, clutching a smaller girl, perhaps 5 or 6, his protective instinct fierce even in his own fear. Their eyes, wide and terrified, met mine, pleading, a silent cry for help. They were strangers, children from the neighboring farm, the Millers, a family I knew only by sight. My heart ached with a sudden, fierce protectiveness, a primal urge to shield them from harm. How had they gotten here? Where were their parents, their guardians? The questions flooded my mind, a torrent of worry, but there was no time for answers, only action. "Quickly!" I yelled, my voice barely audible above the storm's roar, raw with urgency. "Inside! Now!" I pulled the door open just enough for them to squeeze through, pushing them inside with a desperate urgency, my hands guiding their small, trembling bodies. The wind tried to follow, a hungry beast, but I slammed the door shut, securing the chains with trembling hands, my breath coming in ragged gasps. They were safe, for now. The 2 children, shivering uncontrollably, collapsed onto the hay-strewn floor, their small bodies trembling like leaves in the wind, utterly spent. The boy, his face smudged with dirt and tears, still clutched his sister, who was whimpering softly, a tiny, heartbroken sound. My heart twisted with a mix of relief that they were alive and profound sadness for their ordeal. They were safe, but their ordeal was far from over, and the path ahead was uncertain. I knelt beside them, pulling my thick wool shawl from my shoulders and wrapping it around the little girl, Sarah, trying to impart some warmth, some comfort from my own body. "It's all right," I murmured, my voice softer than I thought possible, a gentle balm against the storm's fury. "You're safe now. What are your names?" The boy looked up, his eyes, the color of a stormy sky, meeting mine, a flicker of trust replacing the terror. "I'm Thomas," he whispered, his voice hoarse from crying in the cold. "And this is Sarah." Sarah buried her face deeper into her brother's shoulder, her small body shaking, seeking solace in his embrace. I offered them some water from my flask, and they drank it greedily, their small hands trembling, the water a lifeline. My mind raced, trying to piece together what could have happened. The Millers were good people, careful parents, meticulous in their planning. For their children to be out in this, alone, exposed to the full wrath of the storm, it was unthinkable. A cold dread settled in my stomach, a premonition of further disaster. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as if angered by our small act of defiance, by the warmth and safety we had found. The barn groaned, a deep, resonant protest, and a fresh torrent of rain streamed through the compromised roof. We were safe, but for how long? The future felt as uncertain as the raging tempest outside, a vast, terrifying unknown. As the storm raged outside, a fragile sense of calm settled within the barn, a small island of peace in a sea of chaos. Thomas, the older boy, had finally stopped trembling, his gaze fixed on the flickering lantern, its light a steady beacon. Sarah, exhausted by her ordeal, had fallen asleep in his arms, her small face pale and peaceful, a testament to the safety she now felt. I watched them, my heart heavy with a mix of relief that they were out of harm's way and profound worry for their parents. Their presence, though unexpected, had shifted something profound within me. It was no longer just about saving Daniel's legacy, about protecting our farm, our history. It was about protecting these innocent lives, about being an anchor in their storm, a guardian in the darkness. I thought of Lily, safe with her aunt, miles away, and a fresh wave of fierce determination washed over me, a renewed sense of purpose. I had to get them through this. I had to get us all through this. The wind outside was still a monstrous howl, a relentless beast, but it felt different now, less personal, more like a force of nature I could perhaps outlast, a challenge I was ready to meet. The barn continued to groan, its ancient timbers protesting, creaking and shuddering, but it held. It was a testament to the strength of what Daniel's grandfather had built, a silent promise that some things were meant to endure, to withstand the test of time and tempest. I reached for Daniel's harmonica, its cold metal a familiar comfort in my hand, its weight a reminder of him. I didn't play, not really, but just holding it, feeling its familiar shape, reminded me of his quiet strength, his unwavering belief in this land, in us, in the future we had planned. He would have been proud. He would have understood why I stayed, why I fought so hard. The storm finally began to recede just before dawn, its monstrous roar slowly fading to a weary sigh, a spent beast retreating. The air, once thick with fury and the smell of ozone, now carried the faint, earthy scent of wet soil and bruised leaves, a promise of renewal. Silence, deep and profound, descended upon us, broken only by the soft lowing of the cows, a sound of gentle reassurance, and the nervous clucking of the chickens, their tiny voices a testament to their survival. Thomas and Sarah were still asleep, huddled together on the hay, their faces smudged with dirt but peaceful, their breathing even and deep. I watched them, a fierce protectiveness swelling in my chest, a warmth spreading through me. We had survived. The barn, though battered and bruised, its roof patched with the tarpaulin, stood firm, a testament to its enduring strength. But what about the house? What about the rest of the farm? A fresh wave of anxiety washed over me, cold and sharp, pushing aside the brief respite. The unknown stretched before us, a daunting landscape of destruction and uncertainty, a challenge that loomed large. I knew the coming daylight would reveal the full extent of the damage, the true cost of the storm, the scars it had left behind. But for now, in the quiet aftermath, there was only the fragile triumph of survival, a small, precious victory. We had faced the storm, and we had not been broken. I stood, my body aching, every muscle protesting, every joint stiff, but my spirit felt strangely light, imbued with a new sense of purpose. We had saved our future, not just the physical structures, the wood and stone, but the intangible threads that bound us to this land, to each other, to the very idea of hope. The sun, a pale, hesitant disk, began to peek over the eastern horizon, casting long, weak shadows across the devastated landscape, a new day dawning. The first rays of dawn revealed a world utterly transformed. The once familiar landscape, a tapestry of green fields and sturdy trees, was now a scene of utter devastation. Trees lay uprooted, their massive limbs twisted and broken, like discarded toys of some giant, scattered across the fields. Fences were flattened, splintered, scattered across the fields like kindling, their orderly lines erased. The creek, usually a gentle murmur, had swollen into a raging torrent, overflowing its banks and carving new, destructive paths through our land. reshaping the very contours of our farm. My heart sank.